Oh no, it just isn't showing.
Kia ora. Welcome to the first workshop for the 2026 year, and to those that are in the room and out. I just think we put in now to acknowledge the passing of both Juno Hayes and Jules Radich today. We may do a bit later today, but the contribution that, given the subject we're talking about today being LGA reform, and I just wanted to note that we may deal with it differently at a later date. I'm going to begin the meeting with a karakia, and I've chosen today to use the one gifted to us by local Runaka, because I think the wording for LGA reform is exceedingly appropriate. So, tuia ki ronga, tuia ki raro, tuia ki wahu, tuia ki roto, tuia ki te tangata, ka ronga te po, ka ronga te ao, homie, fuie, takie. Unite above, unite below, unite without, unite within, unite as one. Listen to the night, listen to the world of light. Now we can come together as one. Today's workshop is simplifying the local government. It's a response, drafting us giving the lead to the staff to draft a response to the paper. Mariana, thank you very much for the work that you've done on this and clarifying both the questions and putting them all into a PowerPoint. You're going to lead us through that. We've essentially got 10 minutes per question. I don't think we'll need it for all of them, but I do want us to get at least through that today, unless you want to come back next week, which you probably none of you want. Having had discussion and seen the emails that some of us have contributed to that, I think it's very clear that there are some things that we'll embellish. So if you're happy more or less with the responses as we go through, rather than tweaking and getting to a granular level, I think the important thing is that we get through the questions and do the embellishments at the end, or the alternatives, or whatever we need. Is everyone happy if we do it that way? So Mariana's going to lead us through them, and if there's a debate or discussion, I'll try and navigate a way that we can give some certainty to the staff. And again, looking at examples that and why you're saying that would be really helpful for the staff to understand why you're saying something if you've got good examples. Mariana, thank you.
Thank you. I'll just get this up and running. Which one is it? There we go. All right, so just by way of introduction, all I've done in this presentation is put the questions in context effectively. So there's no new content here. There's nothing that you haven't seen before from the government's proposal. The purpose of doing it that way is because you won't necessarily have the proposal in front of you or the right section of the proposal. Perhaps you do, but the presentation puts each question into context and gives us the opportunity to respond to it. I'm assuming that everyone has read the proposal and thought about it over the Christmas break. Hopefully not on Christmas Day, but perhaps thereafter. So we'll just start from there, hopefully.
Right.
Not with this. With this.
You can break the.
There we go.
So I can see them.
Okay, so this is some background taken from the proposal itself. The document is not government policy, it's a proposal that government has put forward. And its aims, according to the proposal, are to simplify local government and improve efficiency. Those are the two aims, and there are 3 reasons that they've provided in the document. The system is complex, confusing and costly, duplication, and the fact that there are other reforms happening that have a bearing, of course, on the system as a whole. So the first consultation question in this context, or once the introduction is covered in the document, the very first question that is asked of you is, do you agree there is a need to simplify local government? This might be one of the shorter ones. It's to you.
I think there's 2 parts of the question. I think we all, am I correct in believing that everyone understands there is a need for change? I think that was a general consensus around the discussions.
Yes.
The question is, I think, then is it simplification or what is it the desired result? And, you know, you could be as long or as short as you want to be. I think we want to be effective, we want to be efficient, we want democratic voice, and we probably want to ensure that people can live well. Yeah.
If that's the question, my answer is yes.
So if we do yes, everyone's happy with that? And again, we'll come back to embellishment if that's yes. Michael?
I think you need to answer in what way do you need to simplify local government? I mean, at the moment, does that mean in the structures that you have in terms of territorial authorities and regional councils? Or does that mean the way in which councils operate internally when they make decisions?
Or local government and central government and how they portion their
Now,
things.
the
Yes,
interaction
absolutely.
between
Yeah.
as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good. Welcome, Gary.
And simplifying it for who?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it simpler for the government or is it simpler for the community? Is there a difference?
We also face some really massive challenges, and I'm not sure if being simple is what we're really needing. It is complex.
So I'm going to lift this back up. Are we all in agreement that we need change? What that change is, we may come back and reflect on or not, because I think this will be answered in the subsequent questions anyway. I think we're all up for change.
Yeah.
And I think the more pertinent questions perhaps are the latter ones where we'll decide what the end result is. Is that okay?
It's just that
Yes.
when you talk about simplifying local government, I just think that from our point of view needs some definition.
Mm.
You're simplifying, as I said, what? Structure, decision making, relationships. Which of these, or are all of them? Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to that, but the answer is yes, we're up for change.
All right, so the next question is, what do you think of the proposed approach overall? So this slide summarizes the proposed approach, which again, I know you're familiar with. The proposed approach is the 2 steps set out in the proposal document. The first being replacing regional councils with a combined territories board for the purpose of managing regional council functions. And the second is that that same CTB develops a regional reorganisation plan for service delivery. And just off to the side of that, for context, this that text box comes from a presentation that DIA has provided alongside the proposal. There is contemporaneously to the discussion we're having now, a review of regional council roles and functions taking place internally at DIA and involving other departments, but not involving local government, which means that step 2 will involve only those functions that the review determines remain with local government when we hear what those are. So that document off to the side is not from the proposal document. Sorry, that text box to the side is not from the proposal document, but seem to be relevant context for this question. Just a note that we work through the next 2 or 3 questions, also refer to each of these steps in more detail. So it's a wee bit hard to perhaps keep to a very high level in this one without duplicating for the following questions.
Just one clarification that I asked some councillors today.
Mm.
In my mind, well, you've got existing unitary councils. This potentially would have all of the other councils develop their own response and would mean potentially different answers in different parts of New Zealand rather than simplification.
Mhm.
Am I correct? Yes.
The proposed approach.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I'm sure there are comments. I know the chair has already made some comments if she wants to embellish them at all.
Okay. I don't think that the proposed approach overall is good as regards step 1. If you leave step 2 out of it, having got a CTB, whoever they are, but step 1 that creates mayors or mayors and a government appointed governor or commissioners or whatever it is has so many problems, I don't know where to start. It's not going to work well to achieve what the government wants to achieve, in my view.
Any other comments, Alan?
Yes, I agree with Hilary on that. And in our response, I mean,
Can you
let's,
please use the microphone for the others? Oh,
sorry, it's warming up. Let's respond, I think, to steps 1 and 2 separately. Step 1, giving up on that.
It's red at the top.
Yeah,
It's
What
going
is-
now.
All right, thank you. Step 1, as Hilary says, the mayors are not the appropriate people to take on the governance of regional council organisations. They've got plenty of other things to do. They weren't elected with that skill set in mind. They weren't elected with those responsibilities in mind. It's also completely unnecessary because we have groups of regional councillors around the country who can continue to do that. Step 2, separately, I think the big issue is who should be the group, who's the appropriate decision-making group to work out the future for regional government or local government in each region. The CTBs as envisaged here, being that group of mayors, I do not believe are the right group. So I think a big part of our response ought to be who should that group be, and providing really constructive, useful suggestions on who could undertake that role. Not saying this is what local government will look like, but rather who's the group to work that out.
Thank you. Any other comments? Thank you, Michael.
I just want to sort of back this up as to why are these questions being asked and what do we need to address. The government has identified that regional council governance is a problem. So us, the people sitting around this table here, and it needs to be solved by abolishing governance of regional councils. It's not abolishing regional councils, it's abolishing regional council governance to be replaced by the structure. So the problems that regional governance create need to be identified and addressed, it seems to me, in any submission that we make. What have we done wrong that makes sure that we are the problem that needs to be solved? Both as a specific, and in the Otago Regional Council has been identified as the Kremlin of the South, for example, by one leading government minister who has pretty much a sway on this particular issue. So we need to find out, what did we do to create the problem that the government see, and how might we potentially address it? Is there another solution? And then we know what the public statements by central government leaders are, from the Prime Minister, Chris Luxon, to Chris Bishop, to Shane Jones, and indeed the leader of the opposition, Chris Hipkins. All of whom say, yes, regional council governance is a problem. In other words, why do they exist? What are they meant to do? It seems that we need to address really early on this critical issue, because in this, regional councils are not being abolished in this proposal. Only regional council governance is. And if that's the case, if we're the problem, not the staff here, not the organisation, and then you extrapolate that over 11, is it 11? Yes, I think 11 regional councils. What is the decision making that we're doing that has so drawn the ire of the government that we need to go even before our term expires in 2028? So it's really, I mean, here we are, all dead people walking. I'm trying to get to that, because unless we address that in this, answering this particular question of reform, what are the problems then? I think that you're just walking into a predetermined decision that the government are making and a whole series of bureaucrats in Wellington. So I don't mean to extrapolate or make this meeting today any longer, but I do need to say that the consequence of this particular paper is that we collectively, governance of regional councils in New Zealand, are out of step with both central government and presumably with our communities. And I think until we actually acknowledge that there might be an issue, we're going to find it hard to address the other things. Government obviously think we're a problem. Are there ways that we might solve their particular problem in answering these particular questions? And I want to put that out there right now because we are getting abolished. Staff are going to stay, the building's going to stay, the jobs and statutory responsibilities presumably are going to stay, although they're obviously going to be reviewed, but we're going really quick because we are so bad at our job. So why are we so bad at our job? What has required the government to come to these particular proposals and solutions? And indeed, condemnation from the Prime Minister, from the Minister, Chris Bishop, and also from Shane Jones.
I personally appreciate the question. I think it's a very interesting one, but I'm not sure it's one that can, yes, we have to address it. So I understand that the chair and the deputy chair have offered to go and have a discussion with people in Wellington. I'm not sure that if there's any, and that's a helpful discussion.
I think the position is that neither of the ministers will have time to meet with us, but they suggested their officials, the local government version of the officials, would be happy to meet with us. So that's the next step in that process if we want to.
While appreciating where Michael is going with that, I'm not sure that. So you want to have a very Otago-centric response to this, that we're not the bad guys, or I'm not quite sure how we.
The answer to this is, what is the underlying assumptions that drive this policy reform from the central government? What allowed them to come to the conclusions that are in this particular proposal to frame the questions that are being asked?
Well, I presume it was because we made them do legislation to stop us doing what we thought we had to do.
Okay, that might be one of the answers, that they don't trust us to enact central government policy. Is that so when we are making our submissions to the Otago Regional Council, we have been specifically identified by this government as one of the problems, this council and its actions.
Well, and to be fair to some people around the table, it was the previous council, I think, was identified. But I may be.
Yeah.
You and I both have. Yeah. Sorry, the next one is Gretchen and then followed by Kevin and then Alan.
I think there are a lot of problems, and we don't need to talk about whether it's the council or not, but the council always does what it needs to do under the law in trying to address significant issues. Yeah, the law of the day, and there's a lag between governments and bringing up new policies, I suppose, as well. So we're still waiting for what those may be, and we've, as a council, needed to operate in an environment with some significant issues like certainty for water users, etc. So yeah, it's been really challenging. We've had fragmented planning across New Zealand, misaligned priorities probably between the local government and central government, short funding horizons, which have been identified through the Future for Local Government as well, in terms of how we all work together. And then the integration between central and regional and local delivery hasn't been as strong as it could be. So yeah, we don't have priorities for our nation or for our region, and we're not working as closely as we can. So we all agree that we need to have change. Michael raised some interesting issues there around, is regional council governance the issue? I actually think possibly this is a way of bringing together the local councils in a way. It's reasonably smart to think of it this way, but it won't work. how can we make the TAs work together in the way that we know needs to happen for the future? We've been talking about this as a country for a really long time. Bring them together in a board and get them talking about this. It was actually really pretty similar to where we were at with Three Waters conversations across New Zealand, where we brought everyone together and hoped that we would work together to come up with bespoke solutions to massive issues. And it didn't go well. And we're going to see the same thing here with this model. And I think we're such a small country that we actually do need to work together to get really real about what the huge issues we are facing with infrastructure, with caring for our environment, with climate change, a lot of others as well, ensuring our economy is vibrant. And we need actually all of us in that conversation. So I think it's a way that they've structured to get people to have the conversation. I don't think it's the end point, and I actually don't think it's about regional councillors.
Thank you. Next on my list is Kevin. Please make sure you've tested your mics because they're not all working when you're doing this. So I'm worried that those poor people on Zoom aren't hearing us.
No, thank you.
Okay, Kevin.
I'm sure they will hear I will use an outside voice. I do respect the request from Councillor Laws, and I think that's a question that we do need to get answered in a very short time. But that is not the question we're asked to put into this proposal. And we need to answer that question. And I think I put in a submission or in notes to all councillors just the other day that I'm very comfortable with setting a combined territories board up for the process of establishing a regional, what do we call it?
Reorganisation.
The new plan to reorganise local government. But I think that should be a completely separate body to anybody that is put in to manage the affairs of a regional council. So it's two separate parts. If they want to remove the governors from regional councils, let them do that and put in whoever they feel they need to do. But it should not be the same group that is reorganising local government throughout New Zealand. This is the opportunity, the first time since 1989, to actually get this right. And I've had conversations over the last, since the Christmas break, between probably 30 and 40 different people in my community. And until 2 days ago, not one of them mentioned the inability or angst with regional council. It was all on their on their territorial authority. So the people that I've been mingling with, my constituents, are looking at the function of their territorial authority as opposed to regional council. And like with regional council, they're very happy with the path that we're on at the moment. So it is the CTB needs to be two parts if they want to get rid of us, and if they want to take our powers away as governors, so be it, and we can debate that with them. But the group that designs the plan for local government within New Zealand needs to be a completely separate group.
Thank you. Alan, I think you're next, and then Matt.
Thank you. Look, I was just going to carry on with the discussion that Michael had raised, that area, which I agree is not really part of that submission. But I think it's worth noting that, yes, we have heard criticism from ministers of regional councils in Otago in particular. Now, I don't accept those criticisms, so I'm not prepared to accept that those are valid. I do recognise that the present government has often not agreed with things in the past that Otago Regional Council and other regional councils have done. But I would see that as because we have taken responsibility for protecting the environment in the face of a government that does not have that priority.
Matt.
That's a good point.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Look, I'm just trying to contextualise where we're trying to get to, and that is, I think, acknowledging that one of the reasons for reform is regional councils, but it's about reform of the whole local government section, which is territorial authority as well as the regional councils. So I think it seems to be a shame that regional council laws are solely sort of being treated in a different way to councillors of territorial authorities when the whole system is being sought to be changed. So in framing the response that we're going to put into a submission, I think it's important to say, yes, we agree with change. Part of the reason we agree with change is things could be, which is addressing Michael's point in the sense of going, look, things could have been better, and without trying to apportion blame, just go, things could have been better in terms of the dynamics between central government and regional governance. And we therefore, by acknowledging that things could have been better, we're willing to contribute to suggestions to set the future up in a better way. And I think therefore being positive about looking ahead to what contribution, looking ahead to what a future might look like in terms of local governance, and saying we are willing to contribute through our council law function if we are retained, could be a way to do it. I think it's very clear that change is needed, and therefore get on board with it and offer our services to make a contribution would be the tenor and tone of it, and therefore how you answer all these questions throughout would be sort of the lens that I'd like to give to it. It does seem peculiar that regional council laws have been identified, and it might be because of this historic nature of concern central government has, but it's actually about looking ahead, about shaping things up to be the best and most relevant governance system for our communities.
Yeah. I've got two more, and then I might try and, this is the second question, but I also appreciate that it's probably one of the fundamental questions, and this debate will be informing questions 3 and 4 at least. So the next one's Gary, and then followed by Andrew. That's okay.
Thank you. Look, to me, the government's been really, really clear. They want regional councillors to go, and then they are going to put in place a grouping of mayors. And so, as Michael says, we can either tinker around the edges of that and say, oh, no, that's wrong. You should do this, you should do that, whatever. Without acknowledging why the government got to that. They're a first term about to go into a second term government. They are very, very clear on what they are intending to do. And so we evolved to the point where we had terms where the country was sick of seeing regional councils being a problem all the way through. So we have to either acknowledge and show how we're a different council and how across the country, regional councils are prepared to change and would be willing to work with the new structure that the government has proposed, then that would be the outcome that is potentially available to us. But if we keep going through saying, no, we should do this, we should do that, we need to do something different than what the government has said, we will just go nowhere.
Thank you. Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. My view is that the step one won't achieve the desired outcome the government are after. So I think the only way for the government to achieve that would be to have a majority of commissioners appointed to be able to achieve real change, because the mayors in that group of the CTB will clearly have, like it or not, patch protection, conflicts of interest, lots of challenging aspects to try and get their head clear and above their own issues, and sort of get the helicopter view from a regional council perspective. I just think it just doesn't make sense to me. So yeah, I think that step needs to be, or the mayors need to be removed from that step, and have, or certainly a majority of commissioners involved in that process to get the desired outcome.
Thank you. Neil?
As
being one who's recently come from the territorial authority side of things into the regional organisation, the concept of telling the existing mayors that they now have to work to carry out the functions that the regional councillors are currently doing, in addition to what they're already doing, is quite simply not going to be workable. I don't think they've got the capacity, and with all due respect, whether they have the capability or the desire. It's probably a better way of looking at it as well. It seems that the purpose, and I can't remember what it was Kevin or Michael said, that the functions are going to carry on. And so they're going to carry on. Why would you chuck out the baby with the bathwater and take the governance away from that at the same time while you're looking at restructuring it? That's like building a plane when you're trying to fly it. Well, how well does that work? And I just think that's not the appropriate way forward. If we want to restructure and improve local government and look at regional councils, or any councils for that matter, then the functions carry on until you come up with a proposal. And how you put that proposal in place, Kevin mentioned commissioners, Andrew did as well, whatever, find a way to do it, but it's not what's being proposed.
Okay. I'm going to try and put some of these ideas together. I may or may not get it right, but I'm going to suggest that step one is either its commissioners would be independent commissioners, or alternatively that you leave the regional councillors in there, which respects democracy, but that it may be that you have a very light level of LGA reform that you have to transition, that the focus is on a transition phase, that we don't necessarily do long-term planning and a whole lot of those other things, but it is a transition phase that we work in a much more transactional way. My views on that, and Michael raised some really good issues here, is that, and we've heard some of the answers, is that actually the legislation often gets in the way of people doing the best thing, whether it's the Biosecurity Act that doesn't allow us to have an agglomerated regional pest management plan right across the South Island, or it may be that the LGA processes are just such that you have to do that, or the RMA says you should do this. And we can find defences for anything we want to do. But if we have a better relationship rather than head to head, but actually say this is the outcomes we're looking for, can we work with you to get that result better, then we would be in a better position to ensure that there's a good, thoroughly democratic transition. Step two for me, and I refer to the answer I think yesterday in the ODT yesterday, we're lucky with that the South Island wide review would make sense, and that works with Ngā Tahu and its boundaries generally as well. But a South Island review would be better potentially than just a Otago-wide review. And I think that one of the worst things about CTBs were the potential of having 11 different solutions over and above unitary councils, which certainly wouldn't help in drafting legislation, let alone in getting good, simplified local government. Does that sort of bring in all of the ideas to date or not?
I think the other one that people brought up was whether you had a separate board or not working on something. Yep.
Yeah, so the reorganisation one,
Yep.
that was where I said, do
Okay,
people
sorry.
think about South Island or
Right.
just Otago-wide?
Yeah.
And, you know, if you look at the Local Government Commission of 1989, which I think did it New Zealand-wide, and I understand the complexities of that, I'd rather have people who understood the South Island people, and, you know, people of the ilk of Jeff Grant, for example, would probably be brilliant in giving a voice to the South Island, South and South Island. Those sort of people doing a statutory review would make sense to me at that scale. But is that the sort of thing we should be pitching for, which answers some of the questions that the government has posed about us particularly, but gives a much simplified local government solution?
Well, listen, I know it's not in here, but if you go back to the proposal that the government published in November and read what the rationale is for developing these today, there are two. Interestingly, they are nothing to do with the regional council government. Okay, so that's a solution that it's reached independent of the two things it wants to achieve. The first thing it wants to achieve is to get rid of what they see as complex, confusing, and costly decision-making in local government.
Slide one.
Okay, that's the first thing it wants to do. And then actually it uses as an example of that. If I'm a resident of Kaiapoi and I've got the Canterbury Regional Council and whoever the Kaiapoi lot is making rules, and I've got, you know, staff over both of those things seeking consents from both, possible duplication, too many chief executives, blah, blah, blah. And the second reason is that they're thinking about the future, and the government's resource management reform and other changes will change how councils operate in the future. All right, so we know that that legislation is coming in, I think next month is when it's meant to be in its detailed status. Introduced into House, sorry. So if that's the case, ironically, they're making the case for changing local government, not for changing local governance.
Mm.
So the argument of the document is that local governance is complex and costly, convoluted. Frankly, there's too much of it, essentially, and we're going to change it so that from the central government we don't need as much. But in the meantime, we're getting rid of you. So I actually think that we need to make the distinction when we do actually make the submissions and ask these questions. You are really seeking to reform local government. We are so in support of this. This isn't fun. Long overdue. It hasn't been done since 1989 when we first created this mess and we came up with the wrong solutions. Now, in the meantime, you're going to need local governance to make that reform process happen. And there is a role for the elected officials to do so. I can also say that politically, it wasn't just the ORC they highlighted, it was the Environment Canterbury, who did two things that really pissed the government off. One of them was that they gave statutory representation to Ngāi Tahu through their own simple act of parliament. Two, they decided to declare a nitrate emergency, if you remember rightly, prior to the last election. So that really annoyed the government because that was seen as intruding into two areas that they were specifically saw as central government responsibility, not local government. So and then you could go through Horizons and the Taranaki and Waikato as well, and there's lots of other issues that are there too. When we make our submission, Kate, I am saying that we need to address both issues.
Mm.
One is the governance issue. We need to address that. But the key issue is you really are talking about local government reform. We think it's a good idea. Do we? I mean, that I'm saying.
I think that we've already,
Yeah,
so
that's
question
right.
one was we all said yes to change.
Okay, so if we say that straight up front, local government reform is a great idea, we need much more simplification, we need the stopping of conflict, and they give another example of councils going into argument against each other and combating each other. Now, we've been involved in that a process ourselves. Great idea. Let's get rid of that nonsense as well. Ending up in the Environment Court, always Supreme Court in some particular cases. Oh, gosh, us. So as a result of that,
Against our own shareholder company.
exactly. Yeah, talk about shit in our own nest. The reality is that let's talk about, you want local government reform. How can we achieve that to happen? And I think we should answer these questions in the process of that. Here it is. We agree with your objective. Now, how can we make that happen quicker and more effectively?
Yep.
And then, and that's all I'm saying is the framework
yeah.
for then answering all the questions that happen.
Yeah, and that's why I suggested that having us as the transition, but having a different process for that transition rather than the Local Government Act as it is now and doing a long-term plan that no one's ever going to read because actually that's not going to be needed if this transition is where I think is there are things that we can assist or suggest how we transition.
And the reason why we don't like the mayors, for example, can I just give an example, is because these people will know even less than we do about how to run governance over the next 2 years because they have never had any background in that, didn't stand for that particular position, weren't particularly interested in it, and they've suddenly been grafted that responsibility.
And can we please make sure the whole model of the CTB, which gives a bias to the urban areas, is going to water down already the paucity of a rural voice, which, sorry, frankly, I find abhorrent when a lot of the areas are poorly given a voice to date already by representation.
But don't we need to make a simple answer, and I say this to my colleagues today, don't we actually make the simple answer is, does this achieve what we want it to, or do we need to urge the government to reform local government quicker? Because it's
Okay,
my
so
reading.
Michael, can you just stop? Those questions are coming up.
Disappearing off.
Yeah, and we're disappearing. So
Right.
we're doing question 2, but I think we've gone strayed well into question 3 and 4. Would that be correct, Mariana?
Yeah, there are a few details on the
That
next
you may
slide
want to
that we
just
could
check.
move to.
I just want to check.
All right.
I think you're all giving some helpful response. And the question is whether we're getting a clear message. And I'm going to check back after we've done question 3 and 4 that Mariana and Amanda understand. Okay. It's urgent now.
Yeah, look, there is one option, and it just came through conversations with Richard earlier, that around the CTP process. We actually currently have a local government commission that does this process. So if you put that on, if you empower that to do this process faster and down the lines that government wished it to do, would that not be the best process to use? You've already got a process in place.
It doesn't need reinventing.
It doesn't need reinventing. You've got the skills to administer that task. It's just a matter of getting the right people in the right positions to make that happen, and empowering that body, similar to they've done to fast track RMA decisions.
Is that, Richard, was your suggestion that you were talking about this morning to get the local government commission to do it? Because I thought that was a different thing.
It's not my place to make a decision. It was an option.
Yes.
So there is, part of this, back to Michael's point, step 1 is removing regional councillors and creating a board to make a decision about what the future shape of local government is. And through the feedback that I've seen that has been coming in, there is a concern that loses the representation of regional governors in that next stage of the decision to develop that regional reorganisation plan. So if council's feedback wants to focus on, well, yes for reorganisation, I think that is very clear. Therefore, what representation or what process would you want to see enacted to carry out effectively step 2, the regional reorganisation plan? Because what I'm hearing around the table is not having elected regional representatives as part of that process is concerning, because you lose the voice of your constituents and the knowledge of regional functions and the delivery of those functions. So the conversation I had this morning was that there is a process that already exists. It is too slow and cumbersome to achieve the time frame that the government is looking for to make these changes, but it is a process that enables everybody to take part and share their feedback or be involved in those conversations and ultimately still get to the same outcome, which would be a regional reorganisation plan that the minister can then sign off. So I guess the question in my mind is there an opportunity to use an existing process that would need some tweaking to ensure that it could be done quick enough and as also of a scale that it could deal with the whole country at once, which is clearly what the government's signalled, is they want this done and they want it done quickly. So that was the conversation we had.
And what Richard offered to do this morning was to write a brief summary of how that process would work, if we wanted to add that as an addendum on the end of our submission, that this is a way you could achieve what you were doing.
That's
a
fact, and it's a very useful way of thinking about it. But again, it is tinged with the fact that their way of the measurement for community is very place-based, and the measure isn't necessarily what the future needs. So yes, it needs to be tweaked to be both fast-tracked, but at the moment the measurement is of a sense of community. So for those who've sat through and listened to some of those reviews, they look at a sense of community, which is an interesting way of doing it. And I suffered listening to the one done in Lower Hutt where a person had done a review that looked at a whole lot of sense of community that weren't place-based. It is place-based, and I like it for where it may go with the catchments, but if you talk to someone in the Pomahaka or Tapanui, their interaction probably is more in Gore as a community for facilities for libraries and books and everything, or a lot of functions, but they're in Otago. And it's the flexibility that isn't in the local government commission at the moment that I think we should be looking at.
That's what we'd want to change, Kate.
Yeah.
That's where making it fit for.
Well, it's both the timeliness in the process, but also what the granular.
So in the submission,
Yeah.
if the, my advice would be if the council's position is that you have concerns about step one and that regional representation is not part of it, what is the alternative you are offering the government? Because if there is an alternative, there's no point writing you've got a problem.
Absolutely right.
The question is, it's the local government commission and whether it's South Island wide, I suppose it's scale and intents of it. But we don't have to come back to that detail at the moment. I think it's a good one for us to make sure that we've got in our heads. And we'll come back to that as that wind up, because I think the answer is we don't like them, but we need to find the solution. And that's that wrap up in the response.
If we've got enough on question 2 and we've started morphing into question 3 and 4, my response to question 3 would be, I don't think we should replace regional councillors with a CTB, because I think there's 2 separate requirements involved here. There's the business as usual regional council for as long as that's going to exist, and there's the people who will get in amongst changes that will supposedly simplify and improve local government, and they're 2 completely separate things. And once you separate them out, you wouldn't replace regional councillors with the CTB, because that if that CTB is the change board, then that's a separate thing. And if there's business as usual and a change board, we'll leave the regional councils where they are and then focus on who would be most usefully on the change board, or how would you set that up to achieve that. And so what I like or dislike about the proposal to replace them is that it's 2 separate things, and you wouldn't replace the business as usual part, but it just doesn't make sense to replace it just because you've got a change thing happening with a different set of skills and a different lot of people who you'd want to do that.
We've, I think, answered this question to a large extent. Are there any other comments? And again, I'll go back and say it's about democracy as well, because there are people who are concerned about that and who a local voice. But no other questions about those. Did you want to say anything more about questions 3 and 4? So I have jumped the slide.
Yeah, I
Is
think
there anything we haven't really touched on?
I think so. There are a few details on here that are specific to, well, there's one detail specific to Otago. Having looked at the summary, this is where you may wish to comment about Port Otago if you think it's relevant to do so at this stage. The other context here, the second set of bullets are not from the proposal, but have been drawn from other sources, including DIA's presentation, including the detail, well, I'm going in the wrong order here, sorry, but including the detail that this process would use regional council funding. So you may wish to comment in your submission on that part of the proposal. The first bullet point in that second section followed from a discussion I had with a Ngāi Tahu contractor who indicated that Ngāi Tahu will also be submitting regarding the lack of mana whenua involvement in these proposals, and we may wish to consider whether we want to comment on that in our submission as well. And yes, just to note that the Crown participation discussions are a separate question, question 5, and it's at that point where we could contrast the idea of the commission, the local government commission, and the Crown participation options that are here, and the difference really is the structure of the commission as opposed to the human beings involved, because you could imagine that a staff member at the commission might be the same as a staff member who was given the role of Crown Commissioner. It's whether they fall under that structure or not of the local government commission or not. So we come back to that later. I should also say that it's questions 9 and 10 that talk about the regional reorganisation plans. So we do get to more detail about those as well, and that would be a good place to talk about who's best placed to deliver the plans when we talk about the content of the plans. But Kate, it's really up to you whether you want to dig into these specific questions, questions 3 and 4.
We have covered this off. And actually, someone pointed out before and I think it's Michael, about the CTBs. We've got mayors who are elected to do one job. They're now being asked to do the CTB job, which is govern the regional councils, but they're also meant to do reorganisation plans. So they're getting two more jobs on top of what is essentially a full-time job. Yeah, unbelievable. The question I have, if we look at the feedback you've got today, we're 50 minutes into this, is where are you thinking that we've given you some clear direction in the first 4 questions or not?
I think in terms of how your concerns about CTBs governing regional councils, that there's been a lot of good commentary that I could use. That it's more these detailed, whether you want to dig into some of the specific points on here about Port Otago funding and Mana Whenua that would be outstanding, because I don't think we've touched on any of those 3 things.
I think some of the emails said, but I'm not sure that this we have around the table today, and I concur. I think also the understanding of I'm going to go back to the place-based stuff. I think the problem with the CTBs, where you've got one voice covering an area like Clutha, compared to one voice covering much smaller councils, it doesn't make sense in some of these large rural areas, especially in Otago. And I just want to make that point. It is really hard to give that place, so the lower population-based places, a decent voice in this proposal.
I think that comes up under the vote thing, which we will get to as well.
Okay.
It's a crude way of discussing it, but it's that concept.
Yeah.
Just specifically on Port Otago then, seeing as how it's up there and based on your comments as well as the port and ownership and the benefits of that were distributed across all of Otago. So if you had, sort of population-based voting, etc., in managing things in the future, it wouldn't be how it's intended for our region as well. So specifically to that one, there are some quite important ramifications. Yeah.
So it's not just Port Otago, I presume. I don't know.
Yeah.
Clutha used to own forestry, for example, and presumably everything is in the mix, and Dunedin cities assets would be also in that mix. So I think we need to be lifted up to be all of them, because if it was going to be unitary, I'm part of Dunedin at the moment, I probably wouldn't be part of Dunedin in a different, or may not be, those sort of asset sharing. I think we need to lift it up rather than just being one company. Yeah.
Me?
Yes, sorry, Kevin.
Yeah, I think we're a step ahead of where we actually should be. Port Otago's actually got nothing to do with this conversation. The conversation is about the body that's going to put the regional reorganisation plan together, and the port, or what other assets any other organisation will actually drop out of that. So I wouldn't be mentioning the port at all at this stage.
I concur.
I would not be letting them know we've even got a port.
I'd be surprised they would do it. Yeah.
They will be aware of it, but I'm just saying that's not part of this. That's not part of what we're trying to establish here.
You may know that on Roscoe Stadium, though. Anyway.
That we're paid for.
Yes, that's right.
Any other comments, especially those on Zoom? Sorry, I haven't been watching that screen, but I don't think it's been you. Any other comments? The other one you talked about, Port Otago, what was the other one?
Mana Whenua.
Oh, Mana Whenua.
Well, that comes under the treaty question on.
Yeah, there's a treaty question on it, so we'll leave that at the end if that's okay.
That's fine.
Yeah, thank you.
Funding was the 3rd, but again.
So this is what so the savings they're getting on having regional councillors is going to pay for all of this. Is that essentially how this becomes cost neutral? Oh, and
not specified.
Yeah, 3 commissioners will be only 3/12 of what we cost.
Yeah, sorry, Kate. And important point is that the boards essentially govern a set boundary, and it assumes that that boundary is the one that there should be in the future as well. Whereas if you stepped out to a local government commission or some sort of wider analysis, your South Island one, you may well find that the boundaries needed to change. They could be completely different in a restructure to basically Otago come together mayors and continue to govern exactly Otago.
And I think Waitaki is the prime example.
And again, it's the catchment
the catchment approach with Waitaki. Waitaki is the great example of that.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
Clifton.
it could be smaller, it could be bigger, it could be all as, I don't know, but yeah.
We've got big rivers that comes, the boundaries certainly become more difficult. Matt,
Sort of building on that a little bit, but I think that there's better scope for innovation and fresh thinking if it
Yeah.
is, if it's not tied to territorial authority that is involved. You know, if there's a local government commission and or, you know, commissioners connected with that to flesh them out, I think there's better chance of fresher thinking and better ideas coming through. So I think that'd be a nice touch if we could put that into our response somewhere, you know, innovative and clearer thinking.
and acknowledge the inherent conflict on the oaths that all of those mayors have made. Yes, Neil.
I think, at the risk of restating what's been picked up on, is that, and to Gretchen's point, I think in particular, is that if you confine yourself to the current regional council boundaries, you're just going to do the same but in a different way, perhaps, whatever. Whereas nothing should be off the table in terms of, it could be South Island, whatever, because when you get into catchments, there are issues. And Waitaki is a great example, because all of a sudden you want to have the catchment together, then you've just gone to the Mackenzie country. All those sort of things. So I think it's really important that we're not bound, the proposal they've got for CDBs bounds us, well, the communities, into something that's there, and makes it difficult, I think, for the blue sky thinking of better outcomes to, and as we said, it says simplify, but actually to make it fit for purpose, which is, I think, the key thing about it.
Good point. Thank you. I think we've given enough guidance. I appreciate we haven't answered the question for Otago, but I think it falls out of rather than has to drive a decision.
That's fine.
In fact, it probably just heightens the conflicts that they've had around the CTB table going for the golden goose. The rationality may not be there. The question 5, would you like to lead us through the parts of that question? This is what level of Crown participation in regional decision making do you prefer?
Yeah, and again, we've discussed a lot of this, or we've talked about a lot of things that are relevant to this question, none of which really touch on the precise role of the Crown Commissioner, but rather we've talked about whether a separate party entirely would be involved. So I'm not sure how you want to address that in this question. We could pick up on the idea of the Local Government Commission, or spend a bit more time thinking about who would be best placed to fulfil the roles that have been provided to the CTB in this context, or we could simply move on. I just note that the government has made it clear in their material that their preferred approach was for the CTB to be comprised of mayors, and the understanding provided by officials is that these other options were introduced after discussion with coalition partners really fairly late in the piece.
Because there are 2 steps to this process, and step 1 is I'll need to go back to that slide now. Step 1 is replace regional councillors with combined. If that wasn't happening, but that they wanted to have some oversight of the regional councils acting well or transitioning well, you could have a statutory observer or something assisting that process. And I wouldn't say that was a bad thing, because again, if it's going to be something that assists us working out how these work together, they will be seen as a good conduit to feedback information. The step 2 being develop the regional reorganisation plan. I think I'm hearing that people think something like the Local Government Commission, albeit it may be fast-tracked and it may have different measures and it may be different people, is a better model for doing step 2. And I think we have to be really clear about those steps and the options in answering this question. Have I picked up on those views? Okay.
I think the question you're asked here is should there be a Crown Commissioner at all or not? I mean, that's the issue we were asked to address with this question. All I can give you my answer to that is absolutely not. In fact,
Step 1 or step 2 though?
Well, there should be no Crown role at all, in my view, other than you could go the Crown Observer if you wanted to, but I don't know why you'd want to. They don't have any statutory role. They're just there to make sure that you've dotted the I's and crossed the T's and you haven't done anything really stupid. a Crown Commissioner under this particular proposal would have the responsibility to take over all of the functions that we currently have. Now, I'm only aware of Crown Commissioners and councils in two councils. There's Kaipara, and there was Tauranga.
Yeah.
And I don't know that they
Ecan for a
covered
while.
themselves in glory. And
Ecan.
sorry, the other one?
He can for.
Oh, Ecan, that's right.
And it didn't.
Three, that's right. And they were, and I'm not sure that they covered themselves in glory, and they were widely regarded as being anti-democratic by nature.
Mm.
And I think that legitimacy still flows, that you are taking away the right of the community to have an input into decision-making by the appointment of an external commissioner. And I think we should reject that in toto in our answer.
So that's for step one. Can we just put step one up? Oh,
Michael's saying for both. Just
for
don't
both.
end it.
You don't, for
Zero.
the reorganisation.
No, I don't think that Crown Commissioners have a role in local government reform.
So maybe so the local government commission.
Yeah, can
Is
we
it
just?
Crown-
That's an entirely different issue.
So, I just want to clarify that. Are you talking about Crown Commissioner is different from the local government commission?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We,
I'm
we,
sorry, yeah,
we,
sorry, I
we
was
are the
losing-
ones who have introduced the local government
Yes,
commission. It's
okay.
not referred
That's
to
right, it's
here.
not, and we, let's not get hung up on that.
Yeah.
It's a process, it's just another process.
Yeah.
I wouldn't
Yeah.
get hung up on the local
No.
government commission.
No,
No,
But if
So-
we're saying no,
That seems valid.
we've got to put something else forward, and that is a process we could consider that enables regional representation through that process.
no,
Michael's saying no Crown involvement, full stop.
exactly.
Doesn't matter if it's
And in
part
fact, it's obviously not the government's preferred approach, because its preferred approach is to have democratically elected governance running the show in that interim period. And I'm suggesting, well, that seems a much better option than having unelected, appointed individuals who are going to be having a significant say in the restructure of local government in our region. And that's wrong.
Thank you, sorry, not councillor, chair.
Yep.
Kelly.
My answer to question 5 is that the level of Crown participation in regional decision making, that's the question, which do I prefer? And I prefer that the regional councillors are left in place in the interim until new things come, and that the Crown participation would be in involving themselves in creating either a South Island wide or a New Zealand wide board to look into how to reorganise local government. So that's what I think their participation should be, not doing anything with what's going on in the regional councils at the moment, but doing the other part of the task that's happening here, which is the board, and that it should be South Island wide or New Zealand wide.
Thank you. No other hands up on this. Are you happy that you've got a clear-ish direction on that?
I think that we've had two different proposals here. One that the Crown is involved not in phase 2, and one that they're not involved at all. So it'd be good to just confirm what we want the proposal to say, or whether we want to say that there are those two are held simultaneously.
Well, they have to be involved in any change
Yeah.
because they've got to
Or
set up
leading.
boards of change. So we're saying no to them doing regional councils in the meantime. And yes, of course, they have to be involved in generally setting up at least the groups who are doing change. And we recommend on either South Island wide or New Zealand wide.
Instead of the CTB.
Okay, Andrew?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, indeed.
I got a bit of background noise from a couple of Jack Russells, but my apologies. Hey, I think just to frame up my comments earlier on, they were particularly focused on if the mayors are involved, I wanted to make sure that there was a balance to ensure impartial, independent involvement in the development of those RRPs. And if we're going down the pathway and saying no to mayors being involved in the CRB, have I got it right? Yep. CRBs, I'm more relaxed about the Crown Commissioner involvement. I still like to see some Crown Commissioner involvement because I believe I've been around long enough in local government to drive change. We will certainly need, the whip and the ability to stay on task, because we could spend a bucket loads of time, consultation, staff time, and just a lot of resource, and make no headway at the end of the day. If you get a massive revolt from the community, we'll say, oh, well, this is just in the too hard basket. We've got this opportunity for change, and I just want to make sure that we actually achieve change and not sort of renege on this process. So that's my reason to have some central government involvement and direction. Maybe it is just in terms of making sure that we abide by the framework we're asked to work it within. But I think to actually achieve the ultimate outcome of change, we will need a bit of a push along the way.
Can you, just looking at that slide, Andrew, and before I go to Kevin, is it Crown Commissioner without voting rights, with veto powers, with majority vote, or instead of?
Yeah, I'll probably stick with what I said earlier, Crown Commissioner with a majority vote.
Yeah. Kevin, you've got a question?
Yeah, it's to you, Andrew. So are you saying you want Crown Commissioners in right now on regional council if we say no to a CTB for the governance of regional council and keep the regional councils in place now, do you want a commissioner in that part? Or no. So, but in the regional reorganisation plan, you want the Crown Commissioners in there.
100%. Yeah, because I mean, our ability to influence that first step to get our way, I'm not confident that we'll get over the line there, and that's why I'm just trying to hedge my bets.
Yep.
Okay, Gretchen?
I think what Andrew's saying is essentially the same issue as the local government commission or someone doing it, so that it's happening and it's solving the same problems just through different channels. And I think no one's caught up, exactly like Richard said, on whether it's the local government commission or whatever, but there's something that looks at the issue and the problems and the solutions across all of New Zealand, rather than bespoke across, it could be at district level under the current model. Unless we know what we're trying to solve too.
I do think we need to address the other issue that Michael raised earlier, that there is the lack of trust, and if it is about the ORC, that a Crown, whether it's a commissioner or something, having a voice around the table and to enable good transition may not be a silly thing to suggest, as opposed to saying no, we're fine, because they don't see us as fine. And if having sat around and had someone viewing our meetings, and I don't think there's anything untoward about them participating and watching that, I don't have a problem with it. I have some faith that democracy is a great thing.
Maybe the government could pay for it though.
Yes. The step one, if we are to carry on and they are to ensure and have competence, but also we've got a really good idea of how they expect us to transition. I just am putting it out there, not necessarily commissioner, but having a statutory voice on the table is not a bad middle ground that will perhaps open the door for a better discussion than them saying, oh, we just don't trust these people down there. Michael, and that is to answer.
No, I don't disagree with what you're saying as sort of a fallback position from the preferred, which is that, if you want to give some level of comfort to the Crown that regional councils aren't going to suddenly go mad, give some sort of overview function to a Crown Observer or something like that. In fact, I served on a district health board where we had Crown Observers, and they were quite useful in that respect. We've also seen them obviously working at the Wellington City Council in the last couple of years as well. They seem to be working effectively there. I don't have a problem with that, and if we end up going down that position, that's fine. But the idea that you would, in actual fact, abrogate all democratic rights by appointing Crown Commissioners to have a majority say in this region, and you'd have to do it for 11 regions, not just one, just seems a bit mad to me. But also, can I just, leading to the second thing, if you go back again to the original document, it's bloody obvious that this local government reform isn't actually aimed at regional councils at all. If you go back and have a look at the regional organisation plans that are meant to be happening within the next 2 years, they're aimed at everybody, including the TAs. And so it's a really confused document, this one. I mean, I'm sure, Richard, you've looked through it and you've gone through, all the contradictions that are there. It's massively confused, the document itself that the government have put out. But when you actually draw the nuggets out of it, the stuff that's there, and put aside the rhetoric, the aim is actually to ensure that there is an aggregation of all the TAs and the regional councils. That's their aim and objective. And I actually think we need to be, and listen, we need to be pushing that ourselves now, today. If you know where they're headed, and we now know from our conversations with Chris Bishop that this has gone much better than they thought it had, and now they should push the go button much faster than they thought they needed to, then why don't we address the issues that are on page 20 of this report? And on page 20 of this report, they say, what will a regional reorganisation plan look like? What will it include? And if you look at all the bullet points, and there are 5 of them, the aim is to aggregate all services within Otago. IT, one chief executive, one lot in charge of HR, one lot in charge of all legal. If you have a look at their bullet points and that they're promoting. Now, I'm just saying we're asking these questions at the moment, and that's fair enough, and I'm not having a criticism at that. But their aim is to aggregate. Now, we should be trying to assist that process today, which is why I sort of tried to cover that off right at the start of this argument today. I know we're looking at these things now, but if you go and have a look at page 20 of the local government report, the aegis, obviously you have, Richard, is that right? Yeah. That's the central crux, isn't it? Right there. And I think we need to address that issue and be pushing it. And I don't want us to leave today without having addressed it.
Well, my personal opinion is, I know I agree with you, that's where they're pushing, doing that quickly. If they think this is would be the saddest thing they could do, because it would be rushed. And it requires a really good conversation around those communities to understand what the effects will be and the implications. But again, can I just remind us that we're going to come back to those other matters which aren't in these first 11 questions if we've got time. We've got 50 minutes left. I totally agree with you, Michael, that that's a really valid question, but it's a different question that we can't answer right now.
That's the key one.
What you're saying is, in phrasing the response to the submission, if we make reference to comments like that, which are within that report, then it makes it more relevant to the government when they receive it, right?
If Richard will, you tell me if I'm wrong, mate. You've read the same report, you've looked over it. I'm reading this as they're looking for a regional authority that covers not just the responsibilities of regional councils, but TAs as well.
Yeah, look, I agree, Michael. This document speaks to a lot more than shelving regional councils. That's very clear in the examples and other things that are in the document. I think the way to think about the submission that you make to this particular proposal is in light of that and the things they are trying to achieve, which may be, Otago-wide, could be different boundaries, whatever it is. What is the best decision-making, what is the best process to achieve that outcome? Because that's the questions they're asking.
Yeah.
So rather than actually we can skip all this and tell you this is the shape of the future organisation, whatever it looks like, that's not actually the piece they want through this consultation. What they're asking is, what is the best structure we can put in place for us to get the decisions that will achieve the outcomes that we have set out in the document?
Yeah.
That's the crux of what the submission needs to speak to.
Okay, can that be question 12, and we'll answer that with those thoughts.
Well, no, they are the questions.
Well,
Yeah.
I think those are questions 9 and 10. So we could probably skip through the next 3 questions very quickly because they don't. I don't think they're relevant in the way that we're talking about this, and then we could pick it up again at 9 and 10.
Yeah, okay.
Would you like me to do that? And then we've got. Then we'll have a bit more time to discuss these.
Yeah.
Core issues.
Yeah. Could I just say to that, I think we've actually struck on something that is really good because we're saying no to no to the CTB looking after regional council in the interim, and we're saying, yes, we're keen to have some sort of board or some sort of group to do it, and that we believe that that type of group will achieve what you're trying to achieve on page 20 of this report. But in better words.
Yes.
Is that
And I
what
think I haven't got the report in front of me, but I think that the steps on page 20, I'm guessing they're the same as the ones on slide 8.
no, they're
Not quite.
no.
Page
Oh,
20 talks about the.
Oh, it is.
You-
It is. I just
19,
don't still say
2021.
detail. It is the same.
Yeah.
I've just got the chapeau, not the
Yeah,
details.
yeah.
So
yeah.
let's skip through slides 6 and 7, and then we'll have that content in front of us to talk in more detail about
Okay.
who's best placed to deliver the regional reorganisation plan. So I don't think there's value in us talking about how precisely voting would work under a CTB, because we're not wanting to progress the CTB for these purposes. And likewise, I've included the cross-boundary issues for completeness, and because one of the cross-boundary issues relates to our own Waitaki. But again, I think this is, the tenor of the discussion so far has been that this is the sort of thing that would be the outcome of the right process. And it doesn't, to my mind, it's a very detailed question to be asking at this point. It's a good example of what you're talking about, Michael, I think, about the document being a bit up and down and all over the place. But there you go. Who knew that Otago housed 21,600 members of the Waitaki district, and Canterbury only housed 1,900 of
Do you know
them?
that?
Pleased to hear it, Kevin. Because I didn't know that.
In fact, Canterbury actually houses more, because there's a whole chunk from Waimeti down that should be in Otago, but that's another story.
Oh.
Look,
It always was.
I'm sorry, I don't want to spend any more time on this issue. The cross-boundary issue is an interesting one in a different respect. And I gave an example earlier today where I used to serve on Dunedin City Council with a person who got their rubbish collected in Balclutha because it was closer to them. I think having black and white lines done what at the moment is generally catchment doesn't necessarily understand the roading network and the areas of service. And I gave the example of Pumahaka earlier. I think it's a good moment to say, look, actually you need to have fluidity or flexibility in these decisions, that you may have some services provided by one council into another area where it makes sense. And I just think that if we can put that in there, that may assist. I'm sorry.
And I think that's definitely a valid point, or part of, and could be part of the solution. But the sorts of things in the proposal that are under this section are very specific about the mayor representing the region and so on. So I don't think it would, I think my recommendation would be to just skip this question and say it's not really applicable to
Okay,
the tenor of discussion. Certainly.
I did hear him.
Because it talks about adopting, it relies on a CTB. That is what I'm saying. All of these questions relate to the functioning of a CTB. If we're not supportive of a CTB.
We've holistically discounted.
Precisely.
So going to questions 9 and 10, just run us through that.
Can I make a different suggestion? I wouldn't encourage us to skip anything. I think we need to be careful, because if the government goes ahead with the CTBs, then I would be encouraging you to at least make a comment that says, should you go ahead as proposed, our preference would be. Right. So you're not saying, because otherwise you miss the opportunity to have a say about that process should they go ahead with it. Can still be couched on the basis of, refer to our previous answers where we don't support the CTB. However, if it is, government's prerogative to go ahead with it, we believe that cross-boundary issues should be dealt with in this manner. And maybe it's not something we need to solve now, but if people want to have a think about that and flick it through to Mariana, then at least we can address that question.
Okay, so if we look at 6 and 7, which are the proportional vote ones, and understand,
it's hard in this. If you're saying it's hard in this context.
I've given my examples of why I think that's inappropriate. Does anyone want to say anything that they haven't already said that relates to why we don't support the proportional vote, not let alone the conflicts of interest that raises? Is it that you haven't already said? Because I think everything else has been called.
I would just say, if we're going to say, if the government is minded to go ahead with these things, then the proportional vote has issues about maintaining a rural voice, which is hugely important.
Thank you.
Do we want to comment at all about the idea of a third party determining the formula? Seems it's hard to comment on the formula itself because it's not.
The formula seems to
document.
would have been sorted by representation at the regional council level in my mind, but that's.
Yeah, I would have thought that whoever got put on that board would be looking, would have their single vote and be looking at the best for the whole region.
Yeah.
So they should be
Terms of
voting
reference.
like we do around the table here.
The expectations put on them should change, not the.
Yeah.
And again, the problem here is that it means that they're not looking across the boundaries to what may be better solutions and the innovation that Matt talked about.
Yeah.
If you do it this way, you're not looking at Waiheke being more Waiheke being in Dunedin and Otago, or you're not looking at maybe Belford being in Otago.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
could say that too, that an issue for us, if they were going ahead with that, is that we lose the opportunity to go beyond those boundaries potentially, which would be useful to put in the plan.
Okay.
Okay. I think one of the challenges with the formula approach too is that it actually encourages people to represent who they're representing if they've been weighted to simply to represent that accordingly. So it might be counterproductive. What do we want to say about this one, if anything, regarding these ideas of adoption or a mayor attending both CTBs? The proviso being that these are scenarios if the CTB goes ahead as discussed.
Well, the counter to this is if you don't go you don't have a cross boundary, but actually the better solution is a cross boundary, you don't get that representation. It's nullified, there's no ability to do it. So if the boundary is better that Otago or Southland comes into Pomahaka, for example, then there is no discussion about that because it's constrained by this method.
So I think you're talking about
It's
the,
talked about if it goes ahead.
yes,
Yeah.
if the CTB goes ahead for Otago's
Yeah.
boundary as it is now,
Yeah.
the two options that the government, or the proposal puts forward are that the 1,900 people in Canterbury
No,
are
sorry.
either adopted into
Yeah, no.
Otago or that they Otago mayor attends
The
both.
problem is, if you go along with this, where you've got Otago and Southland sitting side by side at Pomahaka and into Southland boundary, if the response should be that some of the Pomahaka goes into Southland, that will not be given any representation because this model actually stops that happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry,
Yeah.
just for clarity, so
Yeah.
we know that there is a preference to open up the boundary
Yeah.
conversation. That will be made very clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
If not,
if they go ahead,
Mayor attends both.
They can
Right.
attend both. Awesome.
Yeah,
Yep.
the
Good.
mayor or a
Moving right
delegate
along.
attends both.
Aren't we saying,
human trouble everywhere.
we're saying,
Six
The
jobs.
mayor's going to be very busy.
aren't we saying that
Um,
if the government goes down that route, it's going to be very difficult
Yes,
for them to achieve
rationalisation.
that's
rationalisation of that and
that's already going to be captured. We've
Yeah.
got all that in the previous comments. Let's just narrow it down to this question.
Yeah.
So
Do
it's
we
And
want
I
to
think
answer this
Kevin's
question?
just said,
Yep.
mayor attends
Exactly.
or a
both.
delegate attends both region CTBs.
So Mayor Cavendale goes to two sets
Yes,
of
which is
CTB
what happens
sessions.
now.
Or she delegates,
Well, that's the other choice. Or
because
she
she's got
says
plenty of
No,
time
that's
on
what
her
I'm
hands
saying,
with
the
nothing
mayor-
to do.
Good one.
or a
Move on.
delegate attends both.
another councillor replies to
Yeah,
the
yeah,
IC.
yeah. Or the regional councillors
Okay.
do it for her.
Yeah.
Sorry, okay.
Okay, that's our preference.
I'm just going to bring order to this, sorry. Can we go now to question 11, I think we're up to, because it's a really important one that we have to. Okay, so Mariana, this is the one on treaty arrangements and it's a Evie or Marty. You what?
Do we want to cover this one?
Oh, sorry, I thought we had, no.
Apologies, no,
No, we haven't done this one, sorry. No.
we
This
haven't.
is the key one.
So, yes, as foreshadowed earlier, it takes us a while to get back to step two in any real with any real content. And that's what this slide does. This is slide 20, but under the set out the future delivery options, there are quite a number mentioned, which those who have it in front of them may wish to refer to. This is all we have in terms of a process that the regional reorganisation plan, whoever it is, needs to follow. They need to do what it takes to map current council functions, set out delivery options, meet the criteria on the right, which I have abbreviated, but there isn't a lot more detail in the document. They need to involve post-settlement governance entities, so a very specific type of engagement with iwi there, not with iwi broadly, but involve just those PSGEs. The document needs to include a transition plan and have undergone public consultation. That's the information we have. And then you may also be aware and wish to comment on the fact that the Minister for Local Government approves or does not the plan once completed under this scenario. So we've clearly discussed the first question about the proposal to require CTBs to develop these plans. We could touch on some of these more specific functions with, on that point of who's best placed to do these specific things as opposed to the plan more broadly, if that's useful. And we've also been asked for feedback on the criteria in the text box at the right about what this will be assessed against. But I understand there's going to be assessment criteria in the legislation when we see that, but it's not until after, the legislation doesn't come, we don't see the legislation until after this phase of consultation. So that would be the next step, that we would see the statutory criteria for this process as opposed to the sort of very broad version we've got now.
Can I just, Michael, clarify? My understanding is that this piece of legislation may be introduced into Parliament before the election, but won't be passed.
That's what they've said, yeah.
That's your understanding too?
Yeah.
Whereas the resource management legislation is aimed to be passed, I think, by August. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And quite a long process for this one. They're not proposing for it to be passed until mid-2027.
This one here?
Yes. So that's interesting, because if they were re-elected, they could potentially pass it.
And they'll
very quickly if
campaign
they
on
wanted to.
aspects of this, presumably parties as well.
But nonetheless,
Yeah,
there's
that's
more
right.
process to be followed, and presumably it's a select committee process in the first half of 2020.
So just if you could also clarify this, because this is, I think a lot of people are confused. The legislation won't be passed that abolishes us and introduces the CTBs or whatever form it might arrive until after the election. It'll be introduced before, but not passed until.
That's the timeline.
It'll require a select committee process. There is no intention at the moment of doing that fast track. So there is a select committee process to go through as well, at which we may maybe, in fact, we'll have to make submissions also. The resource management legislation will influence that anyhow, because that will be passed by August of this year. Yeah, that's right. That's correct.
Yeah.
And it will set out the functions for all the various councils and things like that as well. So you've all in a job this year and well into next year, potentially, and you might see some significant changes anyhow as a consequence of the election. So I just wanted to pacify.
No, thank you for that.
Yeah. There you go.
I'll be relieved. Yeah, was that good or bad news?
So, okay. Have you finished, Michael?
Yes, sorry, I just wanted to.
Andrew and then Hillary.
Thanks, Kate. Hey, the RRP essentially is looking at trying to outline what we would do to become more efficient, more effective, work together and achieve best value for our ratepayers. That's what I am reading between the lines. And what that really means is what does a unitary council achieve? So if we were to essentially outline the benefits of a unitary council in terms of probably the second question, it's question 10, I think that essentially achieves what the government are looking for. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We know that looking at that assessment criteria, Unitary Council pretty much ticks all those boxes. Can it be done? The only thing I would say there would be some sort of cost benefit analysis on, existing unitaries to actually see there is real gain, whether it's financial or efficiency or being more effective, etc., would be another, I think, assessment criteria that would be important.
Thank you, Andrew. I've got Hilary and then I've got Kevin.
The RRPs seem to me are the interface between the RMA stuff and local government stuff. They will go through either way a select committee process, which will really get in amongst this to see whether that's a suitable set of criteria or not. I think this might be sort of early to get involved with sort of saying whether, unless there's something very obviously an outlier to us, then that there is sort of a nuts and bolts proposal which will go through a process to see whether they do fit requirements. And the only thing that we would be needing to be saying is to, if when they say require the CTBs to develop that, then we would say CTBs or other board which is created to do local body change.
I'm going to ask 2 questions before I go to Kevin and then Ellen. I'm sort of reflecting on these. First question is, do you support the development of regional reorganisation plans? Who does it when I don't think we like CTBs, but we do support the change. The criteria questions are interesting, and I just want to put it out there that we have an exceptional place, and that's Queenstown, and how that fits into the mix is quite an exception. And I don't like saying the assessment criteria it needs to have the flexibility to provide for something that's quite different. And Michael and I had an interesting discussion about that earlier. What an assessment criteria would be for something like that, but we need to have some. And there may need to be bespoke solutions. Did I pick you up correctly about that, Michael?
But do we need to address that in this?
The question is, what do you think about the criteria? If you don't provide for that criteria, you won't get it. And so that's question 10. I'm now going to go to Kevin and Ellen, and I'm just raising that issue, and we'll come back to you.
I think that criteria does cover that, because if you read here combining form one or more combined unitary council regions, it doesn't say you have to do that. So if you're combining others and leaving special cases alone, so if you looked at major urban areas left on their own and then had major rural areas, that would be a way of doing it, and that would satisfy the criteria. So the criteria isn't specific to say that you can't do major urban areas separate to rural areas. It's just my thoughts on that. Where was I going before I started? So just in clarity, the DIA at the moment, just to reinforce that this is probably quite good criteria, the DIA at the moment is assessing what all our functions are, and then they're assessing what functions they think they might take back into central government. How scary. And then the CTBs will be left with the job to shape that into the best mechanism or the best entities to run that within specific regions.
That's right. They'll be left with, and of course, all of the functions that TAs have and retain, because that review relates only to regional council functions. So this map of current council functions would be everything that remains after that review and everything that TAs currently do.
And everything that so they're not necessarily saying that there may be some local government functions that may go back to central government.
They're not in that process.
No, but that with resource management legislation will determine
does talk about some changes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's
no, but that will be in the bill.
Okay. The next, so I've got a question.
So I'm actually quite happy with those criteria as set out that sort of page 20, which I think is broad enough to make you to shape things and understand Kate's concern. But what I'm really worried about is when the DIA does this role and says that we're going to take back all bus ticketing to central government, for instance, I'm just saying that, I know that, but I'm sure that won't happen, Anita, I'm sure that won't happen. But will there be an opportunity for us to contest that, to say, well, actually that's nutty because we do it better out? I mean, because there's so many functions that central government do that is.
So we don't know how that part of the process is going to work in terms of a feedback process, or whether it will be part of the legislation that Michael referred to, the next step in the process, which will then go through a select committee. But we haven't had clarity from DIA around how regional councils might be involved in those conversations about where our functions might end up.
And just I've heard that if the EPA is going to take all our regulatory functions away from us and do it all from central government, how does that work when? Yeah, it's really interesting. We get a feedback back on that sort of stuff. So scary. Sorry to be slightly off track.
Okay, Alan, you had a question or a statement?
Yes, some comments, I think. Notably missing from the criteria is anything about effective environmental protection. And yes, very notably missing. So that's something along those lines definitely would need to be in there. I don't think I can agree with Andrew's suggestion that a unitary authority is going to meet all these criteria. They might in certain areas, but we're not up to that yet, which is why we need all the stuff we're talking about, a regional reorganisation plan, and those steps in there seem to make sense. Again, what is missing though is anything about funding, and I guess this whole proposal isn't addressing any of the issues and problems around local government funding. So it's all very well reorganising local government, and yes, I agree that that's needed, but it doesn't address any of those actually underlying and important issues about funding for local government services, which of course the Future for Local Government review did. And though I think it's beyond the scope of this proposal here to draw in some of those wider ideas from the future of local government, including around funding, needs to happen somewhere down the line.
It does reference, in that side panel, it does reference affordability, which may or may not address funding, but I guess there's an angle to it. Green light, Alan, show us your trouble.
Okay, thank you. I've got Neil, then Kevin, then Michael.
Mine's just picking up what Alan was talking about, made me think about the document and what it talks about funding. The only time it mentions funding is actually funding the CTBs. The whole document doesn't actually mention funding in any way, shape, or form other than that. So they've clearly thought about it.
On page 20, if I refer you of the main document, part of the regional reorganisation plan is to set out a financial and organisational transitional plan. So that's where you would, when you're doing your reorganisation, that's when the financial part would be. That, and I would assume that when you are doing your financing the new organisation, you will be saying then, this is what I require from rates, this is what I require from government. That's how I would be taking that.
Yeah, it's not how I picked it up. I get what you're saying. That's when you would talk about the implications, but actually it's about who is going to fund.
That's when you do that.
And a large amount of faith in that Becca is cheaper. Sorry, Kevin, did you have anything else to add to that because you had your hand up? Or
No.
That was what you were going to say. And then Michael, and then I've got some people who haven't said anything all day and I'm going to quickly check with them.
The regional reorganisation plans are on pages 19, 20 and 21 of the original document. And again, they make explicit that it's not about us as a regional council, but about leadership within a region, local government leadership within a region. Can I just say to colleagues this we're a bit mono-focused today on, and fair enough, on answering the questions. There's other stuff that's happening at the same time that the government will feed into their decision-making. Local water done well will have progressed beyond that, which will have made a massive difference to the way in which local government or TAs manage themselves and potentially are to be funded. The rates cap legislation will have been introduced by then as well, and might potentially have passed through Parliament before the election. You've then got this regional government reform, that's your third part of it, and then you've got the resource management reform, which is expected to be passed through all its stages prior to August. So the government's got a lot of balls in the air which are connected with us, and although we're answering these questions, they have to combine all those balls to make sure that they land appropriately. There's a question, and I've sent it to you, on page 19. And it asks, and it's the key of this entire document, what are regional plans designed to do? Quote, what is the best way the councils in my region can work together to deliver effective and efficient services and functions in this region? And I think if you read it, that's the whole purpose of this document. All we're doing now is going through the detail of answering that particular question and these particular ideas. When it comes to answering Kate questions 9 and 10, I think we've got to frame it within, does it answer that question? Does the criteria that's on these regional reorganisations plan ensure that regional and TAs can work together to deliver effective and efficient services? And if you then go over the page, as Kevin has, to look at what they're talking about, it's all about value for money, essentially, isn't it? And delivering a more effective service across the region, which means there's a role for us in developing that.
I think we also on that count have to highlight that some of it is structural statutory processes that get in the way of good planning, like the RPM, Regional Pest Management, RPMP. The regional pest management plans have to be, by the very nature of the legislation, each region rather than combined. And we need to push back, not push back, but in gently remind them that there are savings to be had if the other statutory roles are more flexible.
Which is exactly the point that I wanted to make to our chief executive and to our senior management team. Although we're going through this particular exercise today, it's actually quite minor in comparison to the resource management legislation and the role that we play there. The critical input, it seems to me, and submission that we'll need to make as an organisation is into that resource management reform and the submissions that we make there. This should be the start of many discussions that we have on that, how it relates to us and how we can make it work in Otago. Listen, I'm happy with where you've proposed for 9 and 10. There's nothing wrong with the criteria that's there at the moment. I think we should say the criteria is fine. Then they've got the treaty, which is coming up next. But the critical issue, and we perhaps need to address it specifically, is that one they pose on 19, the best way in which councils can work together to deliver efficient and effective services. And we might have other thoughts other than those questions that were asked today to achieve that end. I think it would be a good idea to put that into the submission that we make as well.
Yeah. Thank you. I think I had one other.
Is it right? You want to make submissions on the resource management?
I'm not going to, but
Okay.
ORC obviously is.
Yeah.
And we'll connect them as best we can.
We're meeting again on
In the
later
workshop
in the
couple
month
weeks,
on
yeah.
that, Michael. In January. I think we've got 2 days of it.
Yeah.
2 days in January.
2 days
Yeah.
in.
Is it just on that legislation,
Yes.
Richard? Okay.
So that it reflects what you're saying. That's a much longer session for council and a much longer presentation and generally bigger.
Yep. I want to make sure we get to the next question. And so, Gretchen, you want to talk to this one, please?
Around boundaries again, I think that asking each region basically through the boards to develop regional reorganisation plans misses the fact that we could map across all of New Zealand quite readily and answer some key principles there, and it should be funded by the government to be doing that sort of thing. And then also that we miss the opportunity that regional councils, and I'm sure others were as well, looking at where we could form more of a national network of collaboration and functions and things like that. If we're asked to do it at a regional level for each, actually I think that a lot of opportunities are missed to join at a bigger scale than that for some things.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you for that. I did say I was going to come back to the people who haven't spoken at all, and that would be Robbie and Chanel. Did you want to, you're okay? Robbie, did you have anything you want to say? Because you've been very quiet today, and I just want to make sure you've got the opportunity before we go to the next question.
Is that live?
Yes, it is. We can hear you.
All right.
It's
It just seems like catchment boards would solve a lot of the problems.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Back to the future.
All ticked, all
boards.
correct.
Yeah, and rabbit boards. Gary will be thumbs up on that, I'm sure. I agree with you, Michael. I think half the problem is that we're dealing with these separately, and it would be much, much easier if we could collaborate with a big picture. How do those roles look? Function should follow function, and the fact that we're doing this in the reverse is slightly frustrating. Anyway, so you've got enough now for question 9?
I think so, and I just it's 2 weeks away, I think, those workshops.
Yeah.
So there would be time to bring something into our submission on this process. I think though some of those comments were quite useful because they reflect these specific points. I just want to clarify that we're now repeatedly coming back to this idea of a national or South Island process that's conducted by a party that isn't the CTB. So we seem to be coalescing around that idea. And as long as there are no counter arguments to that one, that sounds like it will be the core of the.
Can I just make a comment with that body to be formed with appropriate local or regional representation on it?
Local, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Look, I'm not saying one group of Wellington people to do it. We're saying local and regional representation.
I do think the transport network will change. There are other assessment criteria, and while catchments is one of them, for me, it's also the area of service that people, or the connections that are there. And look, it may be in the back data, I didn't think some of that stuff was strongly enough worded. And I think that Queenstown is an exception, that we need to work out a bespoke path for the best. Okay, question 11 is, now can, Marianne, I asked this earlier, have you already spoken to iwi representatives about?
No, not directly, just somebody who is supporting them to develop their proposal, supporting the Ngāi Tahu. So just comparing notes, but it was noted and is apparent that there are no broad roles for iwi in this proposal.
There's 2 ways we can deal with this. We can deal with it right now and have some suggestions. My personal preference, given the fact that we haven't got mana to mana and the time of the year that this is running, is that I would rather delegate this to be a discussion first between the chair and deputy chair and members of mana to mana, that they come back with some ideas that we then discuss rather than us. Yeah, I think that's a nicer conversation or way to have that conversation. The question for the chair and deputy is, are they able or happy to do that, or do we want to deal with this as a generic part of the submission today?
Can I ask the question of why we don't leave it to Ngāi Tahu to make up their own minds as to what they're going to say and present to the government?
We may wish to, I'm sure they'll do whatever they wish, but the local rūnaka may wish, we may support them, we may wish to have a discussion about what that looks, and they may have ideas that we around the table haven't thought about, and I'd like to understand if we can be on the same page. We may not.
Is it possible in the time frame and things to ask what they intend to submit, and if we could see it, and then we could see what the stable thought of whether we have any, rather than trying to develop a mutual response, asking them, what are you submitting, so as that we can look and say either we support it or we are neutral on it. We won't be saying we disagree with it, but we will say.
I think that would be a nice way of us addressing that, but I'm just leading this discussion. I'm not making a decision today. Has anyone got any strong views any which way about that? Or do we delegate it to the chair in the interim to have a discussion and start that discussion for us to finalise the submission later?
Which we would, our discussion would be to say, please tell us as soon as you can what your submission is, so as we can talk to our people about what they think.
Timeframe.
The
When you need
submission is
that
due on
response.
which date, Marianne?
We need to have this drafted by the 4th, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, for the 11th. Yeah, so it's the last late paper to give us.
Okay,
It's always the last one.
I think we can do that in that timeframe or best we can, and if we can't, then we will come up with something at the end.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave that question then until that time, if that's okay. Then the last page.
Is simply the timeline, but we spoke to that earlier.
Okay. Now, and we've got 10 minutes left, and we don't need to fill every minute. We've got exciting stuff to do on CDM shortly. The question I have, are there any other matters that people want to raise that weren't directly asked in the questions that would be good follow on? And I think some of you have put them into your written responses, but Alan has got something he'd like to share.
Yeah, thank you. It certainly seems really worthwhile to me if we can make sure we are having discussions with Otago and other South Island local authorities. Now, I'm not quite sure what the opportunities will be for that. I guess there'll be various LGNZ meetings coming up and not needing to be done before the submissions are due, but just to make sure that we are keeping in touch with other fellow local authorities, regional and district, city and unitary councils to get that communication going, because the way we've been talking about some larger scale reorganisation would be good to get those common understandings established as early as possible.
Thank you, and I know some people are reaching out, but Chair, you may have done some of that work yourself.
I've spoken yesterday to Tamer Ali, and I'd be happy to talk to the other mayors in our districts and see how they're going and whether they're coalescing around any points and share any sort of thoughts that we currently seem to be developing, and if that's the sort of thing you were imagining, Alan.
Yeah, good idea.
And particularly interested in the regional council collaboration across the South Island.
I was going to say also the regional Southland and Canterbury ones.
Yeah.
Kevin, did you have something?
I think I did send you a report on a meeting that we had in Southland, which again, Jeremy and I are catching up again in the next wee while. Just we decided to have a Christmas break and let things shake down and see what was happening. And then I'm due for coffee with the mayor of the Waitaki early next week. So again, to discuss where she's sitting with cross boundaries and that sort of stuff as well.
So Kevin and I can share the making sure all of them are talked to and discussed with and whatever, Kevin.
John Barber yesterday too.
The interesting thing is, I mean, I personally would add that this is not the most efficient way or effective way to get collaboration to get the best answer for reorganisation. It's too important. I'd like us to say that it's too important to do in a rushed way. I do think that a forum that drew people together to constructively help find a solution would be a better way than a submission process, and would encourage that as an opportunity, either led by the government or the local government in New Zealand at any stage. I just think we're reacting to things rather than helping create a constructive and much better long-term solution to reorganisation.
Are we going to, I take it that what Richard's going to produce for us, just to give us an idea of how an imagined way of working might be. And if we're thinking we might add that as an addenda to here's one of the things you can do, and if anybody else has got thoughts about things that they want to attach that aren't answers to the questions, but here's a development of our suggestions on such and such.
I mean, there is room at the end. What the feedback some of us have received from discussions we've had is that while these are questions that you need to answer, and thank you for the guidance earlier that even if we've discounted some of the questions, we should still answer them, they're not a fait accompli, and that if you've got other things that you think are a better solution or a different way, or something else that should be considered. The one thing I think we need to back it up with is examples of why not, and it would be helpful if you think about that when you see the draft. If you have any examples that may assist that, it would be great.
We might also want to say that it would be really good to, whatever changes are happening, if people agree with us, it might just be me, that it all happens at the end of this triennium, because that's, especially since we're charged with the responsibility of you suck it up financially. That would be by far the best and most economical and most efficient thing to do, is to try and create any changes that happen at the end of a triennium. So that might be something we might want to put at the end of it if other people think that's a plan.
Janelle. Otherwise known as Robbie.
Richard, have we answered your question? You said we have to answer what is the best process. We actually answered that. You saw that as a key.
What
is the best process to achieve the outcome sought in the document? Do you think
and
we've got
I think
that?
we have. Yeah, I think the feedback on the proposal as it stands for CTB and what the alternative might look like. I think there's enough there for us to craft.
Michael, last speaker, we're
No,
about
it's
to
just a
wind up.
question, actually. So we're submitting this as a written submission to the,
It is coming to us on the 18th of
right, but
Sorry.
it's intended as a written submission, correct, that we just simply email them?
Correct. Or there'll be an online form, I believe,
Yeah.
but there's no opportunity to speak to it. That's what you're.
Well, that's the next question I was going to ask. I understood that we sent a letter to the ministers saying we'd like to have a chat,
They're just too busy.
and they said bugger off. Is that right? And we've got better things to do than talk to a bunch of Kremlin socialists like you. And
Must have got a different email to me.
is that as I understand? That's the exact. I think that's exact words
You
they
got
used.
this quite personalised Christmas message.
I think they said some of our officials have got nothing to do all day and we'll pay them to sit and listen to your nonsense.
Is that what they said?
I think so.
So are we going to take up that offer?
So Minister Bishop didn't have he was unable to meet. Minister Watts also didn't have capacity at the start of the year, but has offered to connect us with officials to discuss the types of matters that were set out in the letter. So we're just working through a time for that.
Offer Hillary and Kevin to go up, potentially.
To facilitate a meeting where and when to be confirmed.
Oh, that's good news.
Yeah.
And would be nothing wrong with us when we were going up there to see if we could meet with, say, David Seymour and Shane Jones at the same time if possible.
Could I just point out for those that may not have picked it up earlier, the 18th of February in the blue box there is the 11th of February. That's when we're doing the draft submission.
Yeah, sorry, we brought that forward due to the RM reform being due earlier.
Yeah, I just want to make sure because there's people online.
Yes.
It's definitely the 11th, I put together.
Yes.
It's okay.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you very much, team. A lot that I think has affected all of our holidays because we've all had time to, thanked us really to think about this stuff over the holidays. It's been great to put all the feedback. Thank you very much, everyone, for your participation. We will have a break now until 3:15 when Neil is going to take over and take us through some exciting or interesting proposals for CDM.
Bit more enthusiasm, please, Kate.
Well, sorry, I thought there was.
Exciting.
We don't need any.
You can hardly wait, she just said.
Thank you again.
Don't restrict the boundaries.